At the moment, the president's senility has eclipsed the current political importance of his debate. But 9 months into the war, and as Biden hosts a NATO summit, we're asking which candidate stands to gain or lose the most from chaos in the Middle East, and more importantly, who's most likely to fix it. Cenk, let me first of all just ask you about where we are with this situation with President Biden. Do you actually think, and I've seen your posts on X about this, and I share your views, it just seems incomprehensible to me that they would try and persist with him as a nominee. But do you think the Democrats may actually try and tough this out and keep him there?
Yeah, it's possible that they're stupid enough to do that. It's a guaranteed loss. 8 out of 10 Americans think that he's not mentally well enough to be president. Just let's be blunt about it. That means 8 out of 10 Americans think that his brain isn't working. And we're going to run that guy? Guaranteed 100% loss. So the reason now the Democrats are thinking that way is because they've taught both their audience, the voters, and themselves the number one test of a Democrat these days is obedience. So you must follow what moronic Democratic leaders say, no matter what they say, and no matter if their brain is working, not working, they're functioning, they're alive, they're not alive, it doesn't matter. So what they're going to do is they're going to pull a Feinstein on a massive scale and hand the election to Donald Trump. Look, I'm not saying that die is cast. I still believe that Joe Biden is going to drop out at some point because it's untenable. It's totally, utterly untenable. He will capsize the entire Democratic Party. But they're so cowardly that at this late date, the House and the Senate are meeting today, Piers, and it looks like they're leaning towards backing Joe Biden, which is potentially, the end of the Democratic Party. They're going to get landslided by Donald Trump, a blithering idiot. And that's the situation the Democrats find themselves in.
So I want to pause right there and briefly get you guys caught up to what's going on today, because this debate was conducted before today's breaking news actually came out.
Hollywood is weighing in. George Clooney, most notably, among a whole host of, A-list actors, producers. Take a look at what he writes in the New York Times. He says, "We are not going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we won't win the House. We're going to lose the Senate. This isn't only my opinion. This is the opinion of every senator and congress member and governor that I've spoken with in private." And you can bet that Clooney speaks to a lot of these folks all the time. He is one of the Democrats' main mega donors over the last 3 or 4 cycles.
So simply, the mainstream media is now turned on Joe Biden. They've covered for him for 4 years. They blamed his inability to speak on an old stutter, even though you can go back and look up film of him speaking over the last 20 years, and he sounds nothing like he does today. No stutter, he speaks concise, everything like that. And so all these people are completely scared of Trump winning this year. So they're pulling out all the stops. The craziest part about it is, Obama knew in advance of George Clooney's bombshell call for Biden to drop out, but he didn't object. And what that means, and what a lot of people are claiming, is that Barack Obama is now leading the coup to replace Joe Biden as the Democratic representative in this year's 2024 election. And what I mean by coup is that the primaries are over. The Democratic voters, the Democrat Americans have spoken that they want Joe Biden to be the representative on that ticket. It's similar to how they treated Bernie Sanders in the 2016 election with Hillary Clinton, when they forced him out so that she could actually receive the votes from the Democratic primaries. So the difference is now the votes are in, but it's the same type of behavior. And it's pathetic to me because these are the same people that are telling us that Trump is a threat to our democracy, right? What is a bigger threat to our democracy than a party working together to go behind the incumbent president's back to remove him from the 2024 ticket after the American people have voted for him? So that's why they need Joe Biden to simply back out and admit that he's too old and he won't be able to represent America for the next 4 years. The problem is for them, post-debate, Joe Biden has come out and claimed on the radio, on interviews on TV, that he is not going to back down, that he is going to stay in this race, and that he is going to beat Donald Trump. So at this point, if he does back out, in my opinion, that means that he's either been bribed or threatened. And that is not representing the American people, the American voter who voted for Joe Biden in these 2024 primaries. And now the word is Michelle Obama is going to be the one that replaces Joe Biden if and when he backs out. And that's where I got to remind people that when Barack was president for 8 years, by the time his 8 years were over, the American people were done with him. It was Donald Trump that came out and said in his 2016 campaign to black voters, "What do you have to lose?" He received the biggest amount of votes from the black community that any Republican candidate has ever received in history, as far as I know. And ever since then, that number has increased. But the problem with that is now the Democrats are replacing the black voters with the Hispanic voters after they've let in 9 million, 11 million people, we don't quite know, into our country, right? And now just last night, the Republican House has passed the SAVE Act, which is supposed to protect our elections that only Americans can vote, but Joe Biden has said he will veto it if it gets to his desk. That's still yet to be seen. And that to me is a representation of how the Democratic Party treats the American voters, even their own voters. They'll lie and say whatever they believe that the American people want to hear in order for them to get the power. But then once they're elected, they go and do anything that they want, especially serving the people who funded them, their lobbyists, anybody like that, right? They don't serve the American people. And that's why people were done with the Obamas by the time his 8 years was up. So let's get back to this debate. I promise I'll keep my interjections to a minimum from this point forward, and go.
Javier, I just find this such an extraordinary situation where most people I've talked to on either side, Republican, Democrat, Independent actually, anyone, seems broadly in agreement that Joe Biden has clearly got some form of dementia. Most doctors I've talked to say the same thing. And yet, as things stand, as the rules are applied, unless he voluntarily steps aside, then he will be the one that goes to the ballot box in November.
You know, it's pretty obvious what Joe Biden is going through. He is a man of a very particular age. He's getting way up there, and all the signs are very obvious. If you at this point are denying that Joe Biden is not mentally equipped to be in office, then you're just being delusional at this point. I feel like every Democrat that I've talked to about this as well is concerned. They're mortified that this is their representation. I'm mortified as a Republican knowing that this is our current president, and it has nothing to do just with his policies. It has everything to do with the fact that he is weak, he is frail, he is old. I worked in a nursing home for 3 years back when I was in high school and college. I worked in the dementia wing, and I see a lot of the onsetting symptoms of someone with severe dementia. It's concerning. It feels like elder abuse, and really the Democrats are insane if they let him stay in this position.
Dave Smith, I mean, do you agree with this?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, I'm sure all of you guys, when you were kids, you probably read the Emperor's New Clothes. And I remember reading it as a kid and never really thinking it was that profound of a story. It was just kind of fun. But now I'm like, I got to go back and study up on whoever wrote that.
This is literally Emperor's New Clothes. You're right. It is exactly that story.
Well, look, and this has been obvious. I've been covering this on my show since 2019. I mean, it was obvious when he first started running the first time that he had severely declined from his days as vice president. And after, I mean, let's just be blunt, it was the worst debate performance in the history of televised presidential debates with no close second. There's never been anything like this before. I completely agree with Cenk that he cannot survive this. And even if you could, even if there was a possibility that you could come back from a debate like that, the problem that Joe Biden has is that now there's even more of a magnifying glass on every single senior moment that he has. And who here really believes he can get through the next 4 months without having, look, the first interview he did to reassure people that he is cognitively capable of doing this, he started slurring his words in the first 30 seconds. It's done.
Let's just have a look at that.
There are no cuts, no edits. We have not touched it. At this pivotal moment in the presidential campaign, here it is. Mr. President, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night. But your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and I had a bad night.
That was about 30 seconds. What are your thoughts? You know what, with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and just wrap this one up. I rambled too much, and I'll make another video. My next one will be the conversation between Piers Morgan and his crew here. And basically, the last thing that I want to say is I support Joe Biden. We need to, as Republicans, as non-Democrats, as independents, whatever it is, even as Democrats, we need to support Joe Biden. He's fine. He's doing great. He is definitely the one that should be on the ticket for 2024. Joe Biden is definitely the best candidate for the Democratic Party. The people have voted for him in the primaries. And when it comes November, we need folks to show up and vote for Donald Trump and the Republicans down ticket. And I know the Republicans aren't perfect, but just yesterday, 4 of them defected and voted with the Democrats, and it's such a slim margin that only 4 defectors completely blocked Anna Paulina Luna's motion to hold Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. While Steve Bannon is sitting in jail for the same thing, Merrick Garland is not being held accountable. And like they say, nobody is above the law, and we need the laws to be applied equally. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.